Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Brighter Together podcast. My name is Janet Courtney, and my special guest today is Alex Sharick. Alex is the Director of Special Education at Plymouth, Shiloh Local School District, and that is in Plymouth, Ohio. Alex, welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you for having me, Janet. Thank you.
Awesome. So, Alex, tell us a little bit about how you became a Director of Special Education and a little bit about Plymouth, Shiloh.
All right, sure. So this is my 30th year in education, so kind of going way back in the catacombs there. Would be really I had a mentor by the name of Jerry Dunlap, who was my high school guidance counselor actually, and he was really instrumental in kind of the trajectory of my life, and so. Went off to college. When I got to college, was kind of torn between actually English education or elementary ed. And professor again, said, "Hey, Alex, I think you can do this English stuff." And which was shocking to me because I always thought I was a poor, writer, poor, speaker, all that kind of stuff. And then all of a sudden, I've had these people that really spoke into my life. And so, like I said, it changed my trajectory. Went into education. Did what typically instructors do. They teach, they coach, and through the various experiences that they're exposed to, they start to find their niche. So I'd gotten into guidance for a couple years, actually more like 7 years, but nonetheless was in guidance. Enjoyed that. Had an opportunity to be an assistant principal, then a principal of an intermediate school. And then had an opportunity in probably about 5 years ago, a former colleague of mine who works in the district as a high school principal said, "Hey, we have this opening in special education. I know, you got this guidance background, this might be something you're interested in." And, I really gave me a chance to kind of reflect a little bit and think, what are the tenets that I always kind of hang my hat on? And it's always been a quote that I actually remember a long time ago. It was, "Destiny is not a matter of chance, but a matter of choice and opportunity."
100%.
And so I thought, hey, this is this opportunity. We're going to take it and go from there. Who knows what's going to come of it? But nonetheless, and again, that relationship. So just in the course of my career, I think that's been really the mantra is the relationships matter. They really do.
Yeah.
And then you go into my role as sped ed. I can speak to that as well. Plymouth Shiloh. Plymouth is a small rural district. We have all our our elementary, our middle, and our high school all on one campus. So again, having come from a small city district into back at rural. Again, what was a common theme? That relationships in these small districts, you're able to do that.
Yeah.
And even 2 years before that, when I was, not 2 years, but 2 school districts before that, I was in a rural district. So that's where I started. And so it's like kind of a coming home for me. Enjoyed that because you really do have a chance to get to know the kids, the families that you serve, that you work with. And I knew I was at the right place when the superintendent, a shout out to Mr. Churson, love the guy. His mantra for our school district is every student, some success every day. And I mean, he believes that, and I do as well, that, some of the simplest things, that's all we need. And you give that kid that little encouragement, and you'll never know what can, be brightened, as you know. So that's a little bit of what I got.
Wow, that's incredible, though. You've had some people in your life, which I think we all are. I think we are those people now. We are those people that we've made that influence on people that we don't even know. I know that I know what I know, but there's so many things that we just don't know, and yet we do it every single day. And a child, we say something encouraging to them, and they needed it at that moment. That was what they needed, and that's what we do.
Certainly.
And it's so amazing to be that person, right? So
right, and that's when it almost hits you, because I remember a new rookie teacher coming out, and seeing all these veteran teachers, and thinking I'm never going to get there, right? And then
Oh, yeah.
one day you look in the mirror and you're like, I'm that teacher
I'm
now.
that
30 years
person,
in,
yeah.
what is in store for me next? But the common thing I think in my my life is always the building of the relationships and fostering, encouraging those, and feeding into them, because at the end of the day, that's really, what matters.
So how big is Plymouth Shiloh? I know you said it was small, but like,
Oh,
what does your special education department look like?
So, special education department, I am the sped ed director. I'm my own secretary,
Okay.
as well. I have 10 intervention specialists that I work with. We have basically a combination of one for almost all of the middle school. So that would be, so we serve in our middle school 5 through 8. So we have,
Okay.
3 there. Then we have 2 that serve our high school. Many of our kids go off to a career center. So
Nice.
the population that stays back, at the school is rather small. And then in our elementary, we have, again, 3 to 4, 2 MC units, multi-categorical units that serve, our most need students. So that's kind of the makeup of the sped ed department. Roughly, I think at one time I saw, what was it, like 800. I mean, that's on the maximum end of even in the district. So, a really small school district, but, proud of our big red country.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So 800. When you say 800, do you mean 800 total students or 800 in special education?
800 total students.
Total students, yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah. Awesome. Awesome. And so I mean, I know you said you did counseling, but that was a little bit of a leap for you, or am I wrong? Was it not a leap for you to become a director of special education?
Well, right after guidance, I went really into assistant principal.
Yeah.
I did that for a year, and then decided to take my show on the road, as they say, and was a intermediate principal for 6 years. So at that, obviously the principal role, director type role, and so then that's where it was kind of more of a natural transition into the role that I'm in now.
Yeah, yeah. But you have to deal with IDEA, and you have to. I mean, you're still dealing with people. I get that, but it's a little bit. I mean, I tell people, I'm like, you guys have the hardest job in the world, as far as I'm concerned. I don't think you could pay me to do your job because it's a hard job. There's so regulations and people and emotions, and and we're there for the kids, and keeping the kids in the center. But it's not easy. It's not easy.
No, it's not easy, but I would say that's where you kind of fall back on one of my greatest resources are my personnel. The making certain that I'm putting in front of them. As I direct, I mean, really, I take that particular word in as kind of importance. Is my role is a director. Like a musical director. So, services. I need to be able to. One, know where we can go to get certain services, but also, bring out the talents of, the different intervention specialists who have a, particular skill. Like I can think of, different individual intervention specialists who, are really good at maybe MTSS. So they're really good at the data collection. Maybe some others are a little bit more on, the behavioral and the intervention supports there. So, yes, it's a challenge, but like anything, I mean, you kind of just lean into it. Lean into that challenge. Talk to the people you need to talk to. Again, going back to my theme here is the relationship. So if I don't know, the nice thing is that there are other special ed directors in my region I can call.
Right.
And so that that's always a plus. But I think going to taking the time, and we all know that hey I got to go to a PD, and that can be begrudging. I got to go, but you find helpful information there. You get the chance to network. So that's how you kind of combat some of those difficulties. use your resources, know who to talk to, and then, yourself be involved and direct the services, direct the, daily events, schedules, so forth for kids, families,
Right.
so that it runs smoothly.
Yeah. So PD, professional development, do you,
Yes.
it's okay, you're all right. Do you, as the director, also have some influence on the professional development for the gen ed staff
Yes,
as well?
kind of in a broad sense. So I work closely with our curriculum director, in the
Okay.
district. So any in-house, professional development that we have, she'll always ask, hey, is there anything that you specifically are seeing a need? And so most recently with the, the spectrum of autism, that was my dialogue with her that, hey, this is something that I'm seeing. I know even in our, intervention specialist world, we're trying to traverse that. I can only imagine what that looks like for, a classroom, instructor. And so, we were working together, instrumental in bringing, some speakers in. Then they were able to do some really, hands-on type work with our elementary, staff. So that has been a way that we can, address some of those needs, just working together.
Yeah. Yeah. So what would you say has been some of the biggest, I don't want to say breakthroughs, but like education is always like changing. There's always, there's always buzzwords in education. There's always things that we're latching on, and you've got 30 years in, I've got 32 years in. And the way that we're doing things today versus how we were doing them 30
Right.
years ago have definitely changed. So what would you say in your career as you've seen things, and it doesn't have to be special education, but just things, initiatives that you've seen or things that have come through or bubbled to the surface that have become really important to how you do your job or how we educate kids?
Right. I can think a bunch, but I mean, really, the one that pops in my mind the most is really that MTSS, so the multi-tiered system of supports. I mean, I really, what I have seen, when I was a classroom teacher, and I remember having conversations with parents, and parents, getting emotional about, thinking that their child had, a disability or some, specific challenge to, speed ahead to where, I have people coming to me who, have their diagnoses, and I always say, diagnosis doesn't mean a disability.
Right.
And so, I hear you, and I want to get to know, what it is that you, are presenting to me. But I also want to make certain that we take a good look at what we're dealing with, so that we can really target what it is that that the student needs, the child needs. And I think that that's where, when you have a good MTSS system, you're really able to filter those kinds of, the needs of that child out. And so whether it's, behavior, which I would say that's kind of the other thing that I have seen, now I would have never thought that I would be talking about, needing a board certified behavior analyst, and we do, we have one, in our small district. But I will tell you, we are fortunate because she does a wonderful job. Our kids are able to transition back, when they need to go to a private separate facility, because that seems to be, their least restrictive environment, their LRE. So those are the two things that really just kind of pop to mind right off the bat.
Yeah. Yeah. I have a friend who's a BCBA, and we hire, we serve schools, and BCBAs are actually a part of what we do as well. And it's just to get the BCBA to help you to understand what's causing the behavior. Before we were reacting to the behaviors, right? And now
Certainly,
it's like,
sure.
let's look at the underlying cause of the behavior, and then we can cut it off at the pass, right? When you
Right.
start seeing them escalate, you can go, okay. And helping them to recognize, especially if because some of these kids are so incredibly smart, and helping them to understand why they escalate and what triggers it and what upsets them is the knowledge. That knowledge and understanding is such a huge piece of, oh, I get it now. So maybe maybe not every time. Sometimes I just need to freak out. I get that. I have my own freakouts. I think we all do, but
Sure.
but not so bad that I'm throwing the chair at the teacher, right?
Right. And I think, sometimes there aren't healthy models of what, how to address, if it's behavior. So, they see it displayed, I get frustrated or whatever, and I throw something or I say something and then later regret it, so I think that, that modeling has a lot to do with that as well. And so, like you said, once the child, and then even when you kind of partner with the families and talk about, hey, here may be some other ways to go about this type of situation, because again, that comes into those, conversations that I'll, sometimes be brought into, where we're trying to not only advocate for, the student and his or her needs, but also we see it as a much larger, issue. And so how do you rally around and bring the other supporting players? Again, that's that directing role that I see that I enjoy so much. How do I bring that in to give this, single mom of 3 some help, or, a family who both parents are working and they, there's sometimes no time for the kids. And you know what I mean by that. And it's, that's disheartening, but it's real. So how do we address it? We can continue to look at all the barriers, but look, let's look ahead. When I was coaching track, I always remember a track coach that I coached with. He always said, when you're teaching them hurdles, Alex, you don't have them looking at the hurdle. You're always looking at the end. You're looking at the, the finish line. And the hurdle just happens to be a temporary obstacle, and you're running over that. And I try to, like you mentioned, with behavior as one example, there's always a reason why, right? We do what we do. And so you just have to kind of break it down. But sometimes people are too busy, right? They just don't want to do that. And so that's where we come in to help facilitate some of that.
Yeah, 1,000%. Yeah. And that's what makes I think special education so incredible, is that we can do that. We can take those barriers that they have and remove them, or at least break them down, or show them a way to get over that barrier so that they can be successful. And it's there's nothing like that aha moment, is there? There's nothing like it. There's nothing
You're
like
right.
it. Yeah.
You can literally see the light bulb, glow above the head.
Yep. And when it goes off, it's like the most beautiful thing in the world for that child, and for you, because again, you talked about relationships and facilitating that, and that's a big piece of how you facilitate it. So how do you have your special education students? Are they in classroom? Are they pulled? Are they mainstreamed? How are you guys handling all of that? Are they in the class? Are they out on their own special classes? What are you guys doing?
We used to have the resource room where the kiddo was plucked out of the regular classroom, put into a room, and then they were there all the time. Well, we have begun, and actually our an elementary principal and with the approval of our superintendent, we're going to go back to really kind of talking about a 4-tier system of supports. So we have, the first tier is general education. But what we were finding is that we had students who struggle, whether it was behavior or academically, just needed that a little bit extra, right? A little bit extra time, or let's do a reteach. And so what would happen sometimes is, well, where do they go? Where do they go during the day? And so what was happening is sometimes we would call on MC classroom instructor to say, hey, can you help us out? We see this need, when they already have their caseload, right? All the needs that are going on in their classroom. So there was we have to begin to think there's got to be another and a better second tier.
Right.
And so what we, are going to bring actually back for the 26-27 school year is an idea of the resource room, where a kiddo may be struggling, let's say, in English. And so a 4th grade student who's struggling in English, when the 4th grade is having their ELA, that same kiddo is going to have an opportunity to go to, a smaller environment to work with our intervention specialists, as well as we'll probably have an RBT in there, but be able to work at those 45 minutes on that language arts, but then be able to go back, because perhaps they don't need it for math. They don't need that quiet, separate space for the math.
Yeah.
And so we're going to have that teacher's going to have a 7:30 to 7:30 to 3:30 schedule that will be servicing kids that will be from kindergarten all the way to the 4th grade in that particular room. Then we get into our third tier of service, and that is our MC, where a kiddo has perhaps the academic, maybe the physical needs that only can be addressed in that multi-categorical room.
Mm-hmm.
And then our final is really when we're looking at some behaviors that are beyond our scope and sequence, even with the help of our BCA, BCBA, or some of the kiddos that we're seeing with autism, nonverbal. We know that's been something also I think it's been important, is knowing what your limits are. Sometimes we try to fix everything, but we're not good at everything. Mm-hmm. And so I think that's a good litmus test for us always to be able to say, okay, at the end of the day, some student every day should have some success. And if that kiddo really isn't, we perhaps need to see, is there something better out there?
Right.
And, and that's where the 4th tier comes in. So we have, we partner with some surrounding programs that, help the student in that 4th. Now, at the end of the day, they are always a Plymouth Big Red student.
Right.
And we're always looking to bring them back. And so I always say it's, not a sentence to have this challenge that you're faced with. We want to, provide you with those skills so that we can, incorporate you into the general education setting. You find into success. That is your least restrictive environment. But sometimes we have to really, drill down and, like you said, even with behavior, drill down to what is the root cause, so that we can serve it, so that we can best meet your needs, the student's need.
Yeah, yeah, because every child is different, right? Mm-hmm. Every single child
Certainly.
is different,
Yeah.
for sure. So, Alex, where should people go if they want to learn a little bit more about Plymouth Shiloh or about you?
Certainly. PlymouthShilohSD.org. That is our school website. And they'll find, under staff links, they'll find, my name there. Shoot off an email. And I like to always, again, kind of old school. So, hey, if you say you need me to call back within 24 hours, I will call back within 24
Nice.
hours. That drives me nuts now. But
yeah, I think that's a generational thing too, because we're the same way. If you reach out to someone here at Lighthouse, my policy has always been within 1 business day, you will hear back from us, because there is nothing worse out there than to send an email and not know if they got it, and not know if, it's like, don't wait a week to get back to me. I need to know that I heard. I mean, I sent you an email because I had a question. I needed something, right? So, yeah,
Sure.
Yeah. So that's definitely customer service. That's just all about taking care of people, relationships again, right? Mm-hmm. Did you hear me? Even my husband, when I text him, even though he's not a texter, at least I get okay.
Sure.
If we get something, it's kind of a running joke. If we get something, my daughter and I are chatty. And if we get something other than okay from my husband on a text, it's like, oh, wow.
Right. What happened? There you go.
What happened? Yeah, really.
Right.
Well, thank you so much for your time, Alex. It has been an absolute pleasure to have you on the show. Enjoy
Appreciate
the rest.
The opportunity.
Yeah. Enjoy the rest of your semester. It's March 31st, and you'll probably when this comes out, it'll be about 6 weeks. So we'll be heading to the end of the semester. We'll be on the downwards.
Certainly. Yep. We're there.
Yeah. All right. Well, take care.
All right. Yes. Thank you.